This podcast is a product of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. Nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. If you or someone you know is looking for a qualified collaborative professional, please visit www.collaborativepracticeflorida.com and the Find Help button to locate a trained collaborative professional in your community. This morning, we have Bob Merlin, who's the current president of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. And Bob's here to tell us about the collaborative process. So, Bob, what is the collaborative process?
Oh, good morning, Catherine.
Or do you want to tell us more about who you are and why you know so much about the collaborative process?
Well, I'm Bob Merlin. I'm a collaborative attorney in Miami and South Florida. I devote a significant amount of my time to representing clients in the collaborative process and being the president of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals and involved in other collaborative organizations and the adoption of collaborative statutes and rules in Florida. And I'm basically a peacemaker. I represent clients outside of court. And the collaborative process is one way of doing that. Most people have heard of mediation, but what we do is use the collaborative process, which is a specific way of representing clients who have disputes that are family related, divorces and paternity matters in Florida. We help clients stay out of court. The collaborative process is private and confidential. No one outside of who's participating in it should know what's happening. It's more creative than court because the clients determine their own destiny and can choose to do whatever meets the needs of their family, as opposed to a judge ordering them to do things that have to fit in a box of what the statutes, rules, and appellate decisions say. Each person is represented by their own independent attorney. Everybody works together instead of against each other toward common goals of resolving all of the issues, especially issues involving children, and moving forward in a more constructive and positive relationship, especially for the benefit of the kids. We usually use a neutral mental health professional as a facilitator. That person does not give therapy to anybody, but helps the parents work on the agreement they will have about their children. That's typically called the parenting plan, and help them get through the process itself, understanding what the issues are, the family dynamics, and help them work toward a common goal of a resolution. Often we use a neutral financial professional, either a financial planner or a forensic accountant, to deal with the financial issues. The professionals work together as a team to help the clients resolve everything themselves. The professionals do not dictate to the clients what they're going to do. We provide information to them and help them brainstorm about how to resolve each individual issue that may exist. There are a couple of requirements in the collaborative process that are dictated by statutes we have in Florida. One, there must be a written agreement about the collaborative process that is signed by the clients, but typically the other professionals sign it as well. It must provide for a disqualification of the attorneys if either client chooses to terminate the collaborative process. The collaborative process is voluntary. Nobody can be forced into the process. And the attorneys will represent the clients so long as they want to remain in the process. And if one of them chooses to terminate the process, then the attorneys are disqualified from representing them in contested litigation over the same issues that were the subject of the collaborative process. the collaborative process is hugely successful. More than 80% of collaborative matters wind up being resolved. So if a couple chooses to use it, the chances are very, very high that they're going to resolve everything. And what my experience is, that the couple winds up having a better and a healthier relationship than they did before they went into the collaborative process. Our goal is, as I tell my clients, I want to see my clients, well, I'm not going to actually see it probably, but I want to see them walk down the wedding aisle with their kids on each side and not have one of them ostracized or left out of the celebration. And if they get along well, then that's more likely to happen.
Bob, what type of people should utilize the collaborative process?
People who are more interested in their best possible future than going after or attacking their spouse. The results in the collaborative process should be really no different than in court as far as how assets and liabilities are going to be divided, how they're going to treat their children, if there's going to be alimony and child support, how that's calculated. The big difference is going to be how they get there and what they do to themselves and their children. People think when they're getting divorced that the kids don't know what's going on, and they do. They hear parents arguing. There's a very big difference between one parent calling the other to talk to a child and the parent who has the child at the time saying, "It's your father," as opposed to "Daddy's on the phone." The words are almost the same, but the tone, the facial expression, the body language is completely different. And we encourage clients to be aware of that and educate them so that they treat their children better, they treat each other better, and everybody winds up being better.
So if somebody is looking to resolve a dispute or their divorce, how do they start the collaborative process?
There are groups of collaborative professionals all over the state, from the Panhandle down to Miami. There's, I think, 17 groups now. You can go to the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals website to see a list of them. You can Google collaborative practice or collaborative process or collaborative practice group to find a local one. If you need help, call me. I'm happy to help you. 305-448-1. To the group of collaborative professionals.
Would you say that one more time, Bob? Because I think the internet may have glitched a little bit. It did on my end, so I want to make sure that we have that.
Sure. You can look for a collaborative professional in your local community. Go on the internet and search for collaborative practice, collaborative process, collaborative attorney, or a practice group, which is what we call our groups of collaborative professionals. There are groups all over the state of Florida, from the Panhandle all the way down to Miami and everywhere in between, even small cities like Lakeland. And if you have problems, call me. I'll steer you in the right direction. 305-448-1555. I'm happy to help you
And
get to someone who can help you.
What training or what makes somebody a collaborative professional, a family law attorney versus a collaborative family law attorney? What's the difference?
That's a really good question. Legally, there's nothing stopping an attorney from holding her or himself out as being a collaborative professional and providing the collaborative process to clients. However, there are special trainings for collaborative professionals, attorneys, mental health professionals, and financial professionals that are 2 days long, and they go into great detail of how the process works, what the statutes and rules are. If you're looking for a collaborative professional, make sure you ask if they have been trained, and you can even ask where and when they were trained or who trained them. And if they have not been trained, they have a potential issue with the Florida Bar ethic rules, because we as attorneys are required to be qualified to do what we do. And if someone is presenting themselves as being a collaborative attorney, but does not know how the practice works and does not know how to provide the service to their clients, they could get in big trouble, and it certainly wouldn't be good for the client.
Can you also explain or talk some about the cost in general of collaborative and what that entails, maybe even versus litigation and going to court, but mostly just explain how the cost works in collaborative?
Each collaborative professional has their own way of billing their clients. Typically, all of the professionals have an agreement with their own client. Well, the attorneys have an agreement just with one client. The other neutral professionals have an agreement with both of the clients. Typically, there is a retainer, some amount of money paid up front, and the work is charged at an hourly rate based upon how much time is spent. Everybody has their own hourly rate and retainer requirements. Make sure to ask the professionals how much they charge, what their hourly rate is, and how much the retainer is. Typically, the collaborative process is much less expensive than going to court when there's a contested matter in court. And typically, it should take much less time. I tell people that if everybody cooperates in the collaborative process, there should be 4 meetings within 4 months and you're done. And the meetings typically are 2 hours long. There's time for preparation and communications with the professionals, but that is how long it should take if everybody is cooperating. In court, the length of time and when you're able to get into court is out of your hands. It's completely within the control of the judge. And I know that there are some courts in Florida where trials are scheduled more than a year in advance. And even small hearings are very difficult to get. I only have one litigated matter helping a woman who's been battling with her ex-husband for years, since 2016. And for any small hearing, we have to get permission from the judge to get before the judge. And it just keeps going on and on and on, because the court system may be the best that's available for people in that circumstance, but it's inefficient. The Florida Supreme Court knows it, and a lot of work is being done to try and make the system more efficient, but it takes years and years to do that. And when you're in the middle of court, you have no control over that. In this one case I have, there have been 7 judges since 2016, and every single time a new judge comes in, that judge has to be educated, and that judge has their own quirks and ways of doing things. And so everything sort of starts over from the beginning. You really lose complete control. And most importantly, as I mentioned, judges are required to make decisions based upon what the statutes say, what appellate decisions say, and what the rules say. They can't go beyond that. In the collaborative process, the clients can do whatever they want to, as long as it's not specifically prohibited. So you can be very creative. If you were going to court and there would never be alimony, but the clients want to agree to alimony, great, let them agree to alimony. If they want to divide assets in a way that would never happen in court, wonderful. In the collaborative process, we enable people to do that and to be creative and do what meets the needs of their family, not the rules, statutes, and the appellate decisions, which are really for people who can't resolve their own issues.
And would you talk a little bit more about the value of having a full team of professionals in a divorce situation?
there's nothing legally that requires other professionals to be involved in the collaborative process. As I said earlier, the only requirement with respect to professionals is that each party have their own attorney, not even specially trained, as I said, but certainly they should be, and you should make sure that they have been trained. Because we involve professionals sitting at the table and helping the couple negotiate, it is much more efficient, much faster, and we're able to go into great detail in covering issues. So if you were in court and there was an issue with respect to children, if a parent thought that the other parent did not treat the child properly or parent the child properly, it can take months and months to address. In the collaborative process, you just schedule a meeting, sit down with the facilitator, and the facilitator educates the clients how to do better. And we work on getting the clients into a better position. And that it is so much faster and less expensive than going into court. And you're empowering somebody else to make a decision that's going to affect the welfare of your family. Why would you do that? In the collaborative process, you sit down with the facilitator and you work together to decide what your family is going to do, as opposed to a judge dictating what should be done. And there's no accident that there are two levels of appellate courts, because judges are not perfect. They make mistakes. And when you use the collaborative process, there are almost never appeals of what happened in the collaborative process. I've done research about cases all over the country. I have never found an appeal of the basics of what happened in the collaborative process. And there are appeals of family matters during the process of a divorce, after the divorce, gobs and gobs of appeals, because mistakes are made and the clients aren't controlling their own destiny.
So can you also explain that how Florida isn't the only state who is using the collaborative process, that this collaborative process has been around a while and is catching on across the world? Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. Believe it or not, this process was created by one person, Stu Webb, in 1990, and it has spread not just around the United States, but all over the world. It's in 27 countries at least, and in almost every state. And there was a Uniform Collaborative Law Act that was created. It has been adopted by 23 states and the District of Columbia, including Florida. We've had it here in Florida since 2017. That creates uniformity of the laws and rules. And so if the couple live in two different states and the Uniform Collaborative Law Act has been adopted, then there's consistency between the two states and it's much easier to make decisions. We promote the collaborative process all over the world, certainly all over the country. And I've done a lot of work helping states adopt the Uniform Collaborative Law Act and rules. It just brings much healthier relationships and more efficient systems to the states and to the couples who live in their states.
When you were talking about the full team approach and a facilitator and a financial neutral, can you talk a little bit about if a family has some unique situations? And you also talked about privacy. So can you give some examples or talk about professionals and specialists who could be brought into this process if the family has some unique circumstances, maybe a special needs child or some addiction issues, and how can the collaborative process benefit them in their personal situation?
Right. So the couple are free to decide themselves, not the professionals, the couple, to bring in another professional who has a specific expertise that's going to help them resolve everything. So if you happen to have a child who's on the autism spectrum and the parents have a disagreement about how to treat and raise a child, where the child should go to school, what programs the child should be in, they can choose to bring someone in. Typically, the people who are brought in, just like the facilitator and the financial professional, they're neutrals. They're not an expert for one side or the other. And the couple can bring in as many as they want to, as long as there's an agreement on bringing someone in. That helps the couple identify an issue, identify an expert on the issue who can come in really quickly and help them. If that situation was in court, there would have to be an investigation by that expert of what's going on in that family. You would have to schedule a hearing before a judge. There would be a hearing before a judge that would take hours. And then the judge would decide what's going to happen with that child, not the parents. And that can be done for financial issues. There may be a quirky financial issue, evaluation of a business, how to get income to use for alimony and child support, how to sell an asset, how to value an asset. And so those neutral experts can be brought into the process and just advise the clients of what their opinion is, what their options are, and then the clients decide what they want to do jointly.
And then we've talked a lot about divorce. Can you also talk about other areas in the family, since you're a family law attorney, that the collaborative process can be used?
Sure. It certainly can be used in paternity matters. It can be used in pre and post-nuptial agreements. It can be used just to gather a couple together and plan to address an issue that they're having problems resolving themselves. And we can put together a team of professionals who are experts in the area. You don't have to go to court. It's more efficient. It can be done much faster. And so this, again, is an example of couples being creative in formulating a resolution of disputes that they have outside of court privately, so that no one else knows what's going on, and they control their own destiny.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you, Bob Merlin. You are a plethora of information. You are the founder, as far as I'm concerned, as starting the statutes here in Florida, and you have helped so many people, and you've helped so many attorneys and so many professionals share the word. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure, my pleasure. I want to say one other thing. I used to be a litigator. I was a very aggressive litigator, and I found out about the collaborative process, and it really resonated with me. And I know you used to litigate as well, and you are very enthusiastic about the collaborative process in Florida and in Tennessee. And you know that it's the right thing for clients, and it actually is the right thing for the professionals. I believe I'm going to literally live longer because I'm no longer fighting in court. I'm helping people amicably resolve their differences. It feels great to be involved in that process, to see clients who are happy about the results, and there can be hugs at the end, even a client hugging the attorney who represented the other party. There's some people who have celebrations when the agreement is signed, serving champagne. It's just so much better than the alternative of litigation.
I agree with you. I really feel like I help people to resolve these personal issues versus going to court where it really is a fight and it really is adverse, and then it really can be a flip of the coin. That's what people don't understand. And you've mentioned it during this podcast, but when you leave it to a judge, you really don't know what's going to happen. There's so many things that could happen, and they are really restricted in what they can rule. But through the collaborative process, we can be creative and we can do what helps each family. So I enjoy it.
Let me say one other thing about court. A person does not become a judge because they're necessarily an expert in the law. They either run for election and win, or they're appointed by the governor because they have some type of connections and they've gone through a process of being nominated to the governor. It might be every circuit around the state, judges move around from one area to another. In the smaller circuits, judges handle everything in their community. And so for family court, in the bigger cities, there is a separate court for families, and the judges are not required to become experts in family law or family dynamics. And so you have people making decisions for families that don't necessarily have the expertise to do it. And when you're in the collaborative process, the experts are sitting right there at the table with you. You can ask questions, you can make suggestions, we can suggest things that would never happen in court, but it works for this family. And so there's really no comparison to the two systems. And I know that there are a lot of attorneys who will not use the collaborative process because they don't know about it. And Catherine and I are perfect examples of what can happen if you give the process a chance and you put out the effort to learn about it. You can become an expert, and you really understand why the collaborative process is better for clients and families and children and actually the entire system, because there are too many people getting divorced for our system to handle. There's not enough money for judges, for court support staff, for courthouses. All you need is an office, or do it by Zoom, and you can resolve everything in the collaborative process and save a lot of money.
This podcast is a product of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. Nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. If you or someone you know is looking for a qualified collaborative professional, please visit www.collaborativepracticeflorida.com and the Find Help button to locate a trained collaborative professional in your community.